Good morning, teacher. Well, Don has asked, first thing this morning, he said, well, why don't you give a sin and fire and brimstone speech? So I've decided to throw out this one. We'll give sin and guilt, if you prefer. Or we could start with this one. So I gratefully serve as a licensed practitioner and board member here at Spiritual Living Center of Atlanta, and it is indeed an honor to speak from this stage to a community that I love and respect so deeply. The title of my talk today is, I Appreciate You. This is a phrase I have been enamored with since I moved to the South. I grew up in a college town in southern Indiana, and yes, my grandparents were indeed corn farmers, and I played basketball, as all Hoosiers are required to do. And no, none of us know the meaning of the term Hoosier. The level of diversity in my college hometown was helped a little bit by going to school with the kids of Indiana University professors who came from different parts of the world. But my first real exposure to other cultures and ethnicities came when I went off to college in Texas. Now I had African American teammates and Mexican American classmates. It fed my soul to learn about different customs, habits, and ways of speaking. After college, I moved back to the Midwest, got a job, met my amazing partner 30 years ago, and settled into cold Chicago winters. We then got smart and moved south 23 years ago. So no one knows for sure if Midwesterners are Yankees or not. But we stayed, and so we are indeed damn Yankees. One of my favorite things about living in Atlanta is the diversity and inclusion and being in the heart of the civil rights movement. Here at SLCA, I actually have two great joys. One is the powerful teaching that we will discuss today, and the other is being on a spiritual path with people of every color, sexuality, gender identity, and religious background that you can literally imagine. Literally, here. A visitor to SLCA once said, "Your lobby looks like a meeting of the United Nations." I love that. And so, through this level of diversity enriching my life, I have learned. And I have noticed a particular phrase that African Americans use with some regularity. I will say that I've heard this phrase from friends, but more often than not, I am offered this powerful and lovely phrase from strangers. A store clerk, an attorney, an artist, and others have looked at me in the briefest and most casual of exchanges and said, "I appreciate you." I even heard a college basketball player say it recently to an audience of strangers in his video introduction. What has struck me when someone I don't know and who doesn't know me says, "I appreciate you," is the generosity of it. I feel a heart opening deep in my soul. There is a connection to something beyond. So what does this phrase, "I appreciate you," have to do with science of mind principles? And what does it mean coming from someone who doesn't know you? And how could it improve or impact your life and deepen you spiritually? Let's dig into those questions. The phrase, "I appreciate you," has 3 words in it, and I think each word correlates to an important spiritual principle that can have a major impact on our lives. I appreciate you. The I is the subject. All right, let's go back to high school English class. Yes, let's do. My mom was a high school English teacher, so she'd be very proud in this moment that I could even come up with these terms. In the English language, there's the order of sentences are subject, verb, direct object. I is the subject, appreciate is the verb, and you is the direct object. So the first spiritual principle in this phrase is awareness. I appreciate you. Who is the I? And how do we know? Several contemporary authors have written about this I, the observer, the you who is observing your thinking. If you have read Eckhart Tolle's The New Earth, he had a great awareness of his I. of who he really was when he was in such a deep depression that he woke up one morning and contemplated suicide. Right after Eckhart had this thought, he had an awareness. Who exactly thinks this life is so terrible that I can't stand it anymore? He realized that there was a thinker behind the thought, even the thought of suicide. If you were at SLCA a few years back, you might have been part of our summer book club, where we get into small groups and read a book together each week. We then come together at the end as a large group to discuss it. We read Michael Singer's book, The Untethered Soul. He used the analogy of a noisy roommate, that our mind, our egoic mind, our psyche, can be like a noisy and annoying roommate who talks all the time and tells us that we're messy and not doing it right and generally that we're not good enough. Michael Singer's point, though, was that once you had awareness of this inner roommate, once you realize that your inner roommate is a trash talker, now you can evict him, her, or they. Awareness is the eviction. Awareness of the I, the subject, and I appreciate you. Once each of us has an awareness that there is an I in here who is thinking these thoughts, an I who is observing the inner roommate's incessant and untrue chatter, we can then calm the chatter. That peace and calm then allows us to be more present in the actual experience of our true selves, of the true I, of the I am. In the Science of Mind principles, the I, and I appreciate you, is what Ernest Holmes calls, quote, the thing itself, end quote. What a name for God or infinite intelligence or source or the universe, the thing itself. Ernest Holmes writes, quote, the mind which we discover within us is the mind that governs everything. This is the thing itself, end quote. Interesting that he writes, the mind which we discover within us. Like Eckhart Tolle and Michael Singer, isn't it interesting that we discover the true mind within ourselves? The mind that is in back of all things, the thinker, the observer, the one who watches the thoughts that go by. That is your God nature, and you remember it, or discover it, or remember it through awareness. If awareness is the first principle, and the I, and I appreciate you, then attention is the second principle. Attention is the you, and I appreciate you. Our high school English class resumes. Mom? You is the direct object of the sentence. It is the focal point. I love pasta. Pasta is the direct object, the focal point of my love and attention. It's true. I dislike bills. Bills are now the focal point of your dislike. I abhor selfish people. Selfish people are now your direct object, your focal point, where you have focused your attention. You can now rest assured that you will have lots of pasta, bills, and selfish people attracted into your life from this attention. When someone I don't know personally has said to me, I appreciate you, the you is what gets me. It's their choice to say what they do or don't appreciate. But how can they appreciate me? How did I become the direct object of their appreciation? Why would I deserve their attention? That's why the generosity of having this phrase directed at me touches my heart. So it feels good to have someone direct or focus their positive attention on you. This is exactly how this works as a spiritual principle. Have you heard the phrase, energy goes where attention flows? Science of Mind says that thoughts have power. Thoughts have energy. Thoughts direct an unlimited source energy to create our experience. How I choose to think creates my personal experience. How I choose to think, that part of it, how I choose to think, is attention. What I focus on, I will get more of. So let me tell you a brief story about what has happened to me recently around this attention. This kind of illustrates this attention aspect with a recent experience I had. So Sue and I have gone mobile. What does that mean? Homelessness and carlessness, basically. It means you can go anywhere and live anywhere and rent a furnished place. So I'll tell you a little bit more about going mobile, but most recently we were in Florida going mobile, and so we were out golfing. And the three of us, my dad is here this morning, and Sue and I went golfing. We got matched up with a fourth, and the fourth's name was Myron. And Myron was a dentist. No offense to dentists or Myrons, but he was a nerd. And he looked like a Myron, and we teed off, and we started down. We just barely got off the tee. We'd all teed off, and Myron's first comment was, he said, "Would you like me to show you how to drive better?" Since I had outdriven Myron by 20 yards, I declined. We get to the next hole. Myron has pulled his cart out into the middle of the fairway. We're back here. We haven't hit yet. The next hole, he hit my dad's ball instead of his ball. He then proceeds to tell us that he has moved. He's recently moved from the west side, or to the west side of Florida. He said, "I moved because the people on the east side of Florida are unfriendly." I'm on hole 4. And he's moved because the people on the east side of Florida are unfriendly, and he's now on the west side of Florida playing golf with me. This is when he hit my birdie putt. He did fess up. He'd hit it before we got to the green. He did fess up. He put it back where it was. I did have to have an earnest talk at one point with Myron and say, "Myron," he said, "I'm just type A. I just can't help it." I said, "Myron, you got to have a little etiquette." He said, I'll try to do better." That's when he hit my dad's ball and offered him lessons out of the sand. And Dad's pretty good out of the sand. So I had 18 holes of golf and 4 long hours to contemplate and be in my science of mind principles and response. Myron was focusing. He had placed his attention on unfriendly people, and then the world had shown up that way for him. He told me about a neighbor he'd had a landscaping issue with, and it cost him $500. And Myron had many a story about unfriendly people, such that he had sold his home to move across the state. His lack of consideration and manners on the golf course certainly could have become the focus of my attention, and then I would have shown up as an unfriendly person. But I'm not an unfriendly person, and I am a science of mind practitioner. So I teased Myron a little bit with good humor, and I spoke to him earnestly once about this etiquette. But I can never change someone else's consciousness. But I can never change someone else's consciousness. And that was not my intent. My intent was to choose the focus of my attention. Was Myron responsible for my happiness and experience on the golf course? No. Just like I was not responsible for his story about unfriendly people, no matter how much I could see that he had created his own unfriendly people with his unconscious behavior. For those 18 holes, I chose to focus on compassion. And outside of the 17th hole, where I missed my birdie putt and blamed it internally on Myron, moving my ball, otherwise I succeeded pretty well. This is not to say that I won't stand up for myself. I would now decline being matched up with Myron in the future. I've changed golf courses, but with my attention squarely focused on compassion and not unfriendly people, I was able to see Myron as another God being who, no matter how awkwardly, is trying to make friends, right? That's his thing in life. He wants to make friends. I get it. So once you have awareness, then you can see where you're placing your attention. So let's turn to the third and final principle from this powerful phrase, "I appreciate you." It's the active verb, appreciate. The I is awareness, the you is attention, and the final piece is the action taken to appreciate. What does appreciate mean? And what then is the power of appreciation? My definition of appreciation is to recognize and increase in value. Let's look at appreciation in the financial sense. You know we would. So in the financial sense, if you buy a house for $100,000, or in Atlanta, let's say $400,000, and you live in it for 5 years, then you go to sell it, and if the market is right, and you've got a great realtor like Jackson, or Richard, or Sue, perhaps you can sell it for $450,000. In those 5 years, your house has appreciated in value by $50,000. So having owned a little real estate in my time, here is the key. I've certainly had properties that I thought had appreciated in value, or I even got them appraised, and the appraised value had indeed increased since I had originally purchased it. But later, when I actually went to sell it, the value had dropped back down. Until you sell the property and actually get the higher value for it, the appreciation hasn't actually happened. The increase in value must be recognized. This is really a huge, important spiritual principle. Appreciation can only happen if you and I recognize an increase in value. What does this look like? For me, I must recognize the value of the dentist Myron as a fellow God being. How was he my master teacher in patience and compassion, as well as saying no on the golf course that day? I recognize an increase in value from our interaction. I must recognize that a time here at Spiritual Living Center of Atlanta, when we have been without a full-time spiritual leader, has been both divine chaos and divine order, thus increasing our value in group leadership and trust in Source. I very much appreciate the SLCA's members have stepped up in leadership and expression. Therefore, if I appreciate someone or something, I am recognizing an increase in its value to me. It's a very personal experience. If I don't recognize the value in someone or some experience, if I do not appreciate it, it's like the property that I didn't sell at the right time. There may have been value there, but I didn't harvest it. I didn't recognize the gain. In the case of spiritual principles, I am the one determining the gain. I am choosing to recognize some experience or interaction as valuable. I am the one doing the appreciating. The power of appreciation is that my value, my self-worth goes up in direct proportion to how much I am appreciating my experience. Let me repeat that. The power of appreciation is that my value, my self-worth, increases in direct proportion to how much I am appreciating my seemingly outer experience. So to wrap up the three principles of I appreciate you, awareness, attention, and appreciation, the I is your awareness of your highest, truest self, your soul, your personal expression of the one power. The you is the focal point of your attention, where you choose to place your consciousness, what you choose to focus on. And to appreciate is the action of recognizing value and worth. Value and worth to you personally, to your highest self. For let's be clear, God already knows your value. The game of life is getting you to recognize your own value. The game of life is recognizing your self-worth. Can you hear that? God already knows your value. The game of life is getting you to recognize your own value. So the evolution of I appreciate you, gifted to me from strangers and then internalized from God's source, looks like this. You appreciate me. I appreciate you. I appreciate you. I appreciate you. It evolves from something that looks inbound to something that looks outbound to something eternal, full of oneness and connection. Now, let's dig into a brief part 2, because I'm not really a here's a 3 steps to enlightenment kind of gal. And so if these 3 principles have helped, yay, woot, that's good. But let me try to bring it home a little bit with my personal experience. And I toyed with calling this part what I've learned as a science of mind practitioner, and certainly my experience as a licensed practitioner plays into this. But I'm not really that interested in credentials, and classroom learning can be a starting point, but only principles brought out of the garage of a classroom or a book and driven on dirt roads, racetracks, and I-85 can truly be impactful. So I'll call this what I am learning, in case it's something you are or want to be learning as well. I'm using these basics every moment. God is all. Thoughts create my individual personal experience. Use prayer and meditation, or breath and conscious breathing, to remember my God beingness, my connection, my as-isness. And so these 3 things I have gotten from this teaching and have rocked my world and continue to. My opinions matter, and then they don't. I have learned that my opinions aren't really that important. Shocker. Shocker from someone who has tried. I've been somewhat opinionated in the past. I would call them positive opinions, but what I learned about that is even in trying to influence people to my positive opinions, I have overreached into what may be their opinions. If I have the ability to create my personal experience, I get to choose my thoughts, then their ability is sacrosanct too. And so what I've learned as I've been releasing my opinions, I still have preferences. Yes, I do, and that's okay. Absolutely do. But what I don't need anymore is to convince you that my opinion is the best one. Why? Because my thoughts create my personal experience, your thoughts create your personal experience, and you get to choose just like I get to choose. I will tell you, life with fewer opinions that I'm attached to has changed things. It's truly changed things. Even going through this most recent experience of choosing a spiritual director, I would have had an opinion that I would have gently, maybe not so gently, forced upon you. I was completely detached. If this guy didn't resonate with everybody, if everybody wanted to continue the search, let's go for it. So using these teachings and releasing my opinions has changed how I experience the world. I can experience it more freely and openly. So that's been my first deep learning. My opinions matter, and then they don't. The second one, conscious living lights me up. So let me tell you a little bit about what the crazy things Sue and I are doing. We've gone mobile. Nobody understands it. The only question everybody wants to know is, where do you live? We live a lot of places. And I will tell you, Atlanta is home base. And probably always will be. But we sold a property, and we decided, we wouldn't have to buy another property right away. We could go mobile. And do you know what? With the sharing economy in this day and age, you can rent anything furnished for any period of time you'd like. It costs less than Airbnb. We take the dogs. The dogs have figured it out even faster than we have. We have 2 dogs. They have been in a 24th floor condo in Montreal. They know how to get on the elevator, off the elevator. They know what door we live in, and they know how to get to the dog park. 6 weeks. Then 4 weeks we go to Boston, new house, new place. They figure out there's a pond nearby. They go to the pond. They come back to they know exactly what house we live in now. 4 weeks back in Atlanta in a new property. It was fabulous. Then we spent 4 months in Florida. Next up for the month of May is Washington, D.C. We're in a furnished rented place near DuPont Circle. So it's been fun. It is fun. And I'm learning a lot about flow and going with that flow, and that you actually aren't leaving home. I am home. I am home here, and I am home here. And therefore we can travel and go and live places. So conscious living lights me up. And it's been great fun. And then the third and final thing you're going to need a deep breath for. So if you would, breathe it in a little bit. Breathe it in. Let me tell you one thing I've learned. It might be your issue, it might not. I am not responsible for you. Anybody have this one? Anybody? I will exclude small children. I will not exclude adult children. It could be your father, your mother, your sister, your brother, your BFF, your partner. Yeah, I am not responsible for you. I learned this one the hard way. I'm a middle child. I have spent a lot of time being responsible for a lot of people in my life. And you know what it was doing when I figured out to detach with love and give them their space? Let their thoughts, their creation, their soul's path be sacrosanct. You know what I learned? I give them a lot more space to be them. They actually come ask for things and advice that I can comment on because they now know I'm not going to jump in and be responsible for them. I'm not offering how I'm responsible for your happiness. I'm not responsible for you. And that I have found is one of the most loving acts. So that's been a biggie for me. And if that's something that you're working on, I would encourage you to look at that as a spiritual principle. And where, if I say it one more time, I am not responsible for you, and take a breath, where do you feel it? Does anybody feel it? Does it feel cold-hearted to anybody? Feel it in your gut? Feel tight anywhere? Okay, let that flow through, because it is not cold-hearted. It is truly generous. And it's within this teaching, it's within spiritual principles, that person is eternal, perfect, whole, and complete. And we'll figure their stuff out too, right? And so we can stay here. So those have been my 3 deeper learnings. And so that concludes these 3 spiritual principles of awareness, attention, and appreciation, combined with what I am learning from the Science of Mind path. And so here's the 2 statements I leave you with. I appreciate you, and I am not responsible for you. I appreciate my highest self, and I am responsible for remembering who I am. Thank you, and so it is.